Hello and welcome. I'm Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today I'm sharing what inspires my art. I'm inspired by nature and I have a particular fondness of birds, and I thought it would be fitting for me to share a project with a bird. I'll also share my coloring inspiration. I'm going to stamp with one of my very favorite stamp sets called Best Birds. I'm using Early Espresso dye ink to stamp onto a piece of watercolor paper and very quickly sprinkle on clear embossing powder. When I heat set the powder, it creates a plastic coating over the stamped area, so I can color on and around, and those lines that are stamped and embossed will not be disturbed at all. This is a technique called Emboss Resist. I'm creating a watercolor wash around those stamped image lines. Pear Pizzazz is the background green, and soft Suede is going to fill in the bird's nest. I'll also use the aqua painter to create some paint splatters in a few different ways. Either knock the brush on my hand to fall down onto the paper, or use the cap to create some flick marks. This piece is very gently dried in order not to cause any warping. I'm going to stamp the watercolor image for the bird in exactly the same way. This is a scrap of watercolor paper stamped in Sahara Sand ink, and very quickly that clear embossing powder is run over the image so that it locks it in place. Now here is a tool that I go to very frequently. It's a book about birds that I picked up in a retail shop many years ago, and I go to it because of the beautiful artwork. I feel that I can take the inspiration from these images and I can use the impression of the colors onto my own painting. And this is something that you could take inspiration from anywhere. The internet, look at outside your window, any place. This is where I like to get my bird ideas from. I'm coloring the bird using the aqua painter and the wet on wet watercolor technique. If you're not familiar with this technique, it simply means that the paper is wet first before any color is added, and then when we add the color, then the wet paper will distribute the color in a very nice and even way. Otherwise, a concentrated amount sticks down to that particular spot on the paper, and it cannot give such an even look. This also makes it a much easier job to get a nice finished image. When coloring a small image such as a bird, I would say that my most important piece of advice is to just have fun. Just let yourself enjoy the process. And if there's a second most important piece of advice, that would be to not add too much color at one time. Feel free to go back in and darken up areas, and even use colored pencils or some Stampin' Blends markers to enhance something. But don't be afraid to leave some white space, especially on an animal, because it can always work to your benefit. I'm going to die cut the bird with a coordinating die from Birds and Blooms Thinlits dies, and then create a frame on the front of the card with a stitched shape die. This panel will now be adhered to a Whisper White card base with SNAIL Adhesive. I'm positioning the frame over the panel so that I know exactly how to center everything. Once that is in place, then I'll adhere the frame with foam adhesive strips. I like to use the foam adhesive strips when I'm creating a frame because it gives me a lot of stability. You could use the foam Stampin' Dimensionals. This is just my preferred method. This is also the way that you create a shaker card. It's very similar. I didn't want to create a shaker card here. Instead, I wanted to have the distinct look of a framed image. I created this card for someone that's very special to me that I needed to send a card for sympathy. So keeping that person in mind, I used that inspiration as well as the images that I took from the book with the colors and the style of the bird. It all just kind of came together and flowed out straight from my heart. There is a sentiment that fits perfectly from Best Bird stamp set. It really is my favorite stamp set. I can't use it enough. It's perfect for every occasion in my book. I'm going to add some dimensionals to raise up the bird as well as the sentiment. And then after everything is in place, I'll add a few metallic pearls. I'm going to use the Wink of Stella first to add just a little bit of shine onto the bird, and then do more of that flicking to try to get some of the little sparkle splatters onto the background as well. I'm using the Take Your Pick tool to pick up and place those little pearls, and it works out really well to place any kind of a self-adhesive backed embellishment. The inside of the card is kept very simple and has another stamped image from Best Birds. There's a lot of really beautiful images in that set. And here you can see the finished project in comparison to my inspiration in the book. Thank you all so very much for joining me for this tutorial, and I sincerely hope that you're able to get some kind of inspiration from this project to put into your own creative efforts. All of the dimensions and the supplies are listed in the video description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching the video. Have a good day!